Like E.T. the video game being dug up in a landfill in New Mexico, this is the Discriminating Gamer. Now, if I have not made the point yet in our little show that we do here, let me make it now. I love science fiction games. I love games with spaceships, with space combat. I really enjoy that sort of thing. Kind of space opera in game form. I love it. I love science fiction movies, I love science fiction books, and I love science fiction games. So it was that in mind that I was very excited to check out Fleets, the Pleiad conflict from FryxGames. In Fleets, the Pleiad conflict from FryxGames, 2 to 4 players take on the roles of various interstellar corporations as they try to be the first to gain 7 victory points by exploiting the resources of the Pleiades star cluster. What's going to happen is, first of all, you're going to set up the various play area. And this is a game that takes a lot of real estate here. Maybe not quite as much as something like, say, Firefly the game or Arkham Horror, but there's a lot of space this game's going to take up. Then you're going to set up a number of systems tiles equal to the number of players plus 1. Then you're going to set up the various cards. You're going to shuffle the various upgrade cards, the various fleet cards. Now, every player is also going to be issued an individual player board that can track their company's mega credits and their diplomatic points. Now, the game plays out over the course of 6 phases per round. Now, the very first thing you are going to do is determine player order. There are 4 cards. You shuffle them, then you just deal out the cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the order that you go in. You're also going to set out at the beginning of the game 3 fleet cards. Now, these fleet cards contain a very powerful mothership and then space for various other escort ships to go along with it. So you can purchase one of these fleets. You can also purchase some of these smaller ships to accompany your fleet. And you can also buy upgrade cards. You're going to go around in order buying one thing here. You're each taking turns. As you're buying the fleets, they're replaced from the deck. As you're buying the upgrade cards, they're replaced from the deck. And you can always buy any of the ships. Now, once everybody's gone and they have bought everything and people have passed and so all the buying's done, you can then outfit your fleets. Essentially, you can place the upgrade cards in the card slots. You can place the ships in the different ship spaces on your fleet. And there's kind of a Tetris aspect to it here. The different fleets have different shapes, and they all have to face the same direction, and you have to kind of make sure you can make all those things fit. If they can't fit, you're going to lose that. You just lost the credits and everything there. But the different ships that you can outfit it kind of have different powers. You have an energy generator. Energy is kind of like a battle currency, so that can be very powerful. You're going to have shield ships, which can like essentially absorb some initial hits from an enemy. You can have fighters that can, roll and re-roll dice. You've got interceptors, which can essentially negate an entire enemy attack on you at one round. So there's all sorts of different ships that you can add to the mix here. The third phase is deployment. Essentially what you're going to do is, again, in player order, you're going to take turns putting a token that comes with your fleet in one of the systems. And then you can deploy as many fleets as you have, but you can only do 1 per turn. Now, you can only deploy one of your fleets to a system. So even if you have 2 or 3 fleets, you can still only put 1 fleet in one particular system. And there's 4 spaces on each of the corners of each of the systems, so you can kind of keep track of who goes where by placing them, in the corner facing you, assuming you have a 4-player game. Now, once everybody's placed their fleets, you go to the diplomatic phase. Here you can spend diplomatic points, which is another form of currency, and you can spend that in order to do some funky things. For instance, you can spend a few diplomatic credits to remove yourself from a system. For instance, you're there with a really powerful fleet, you don't want to battle it, you don't want to risk losing what you've got, you can pay some diplomacy points to just leave. If you've got a lot of diplomacy points, you can force someone else to leave, and that can be very powerful too. There's a few other diplomatic actions. You can play some diplomatic cards at this time. But generally, this is a period where you prepare for battle, and maybe you try to get out of battle. With diplomatic points, you can also attempt to tax a system, essentially gain certain advantages that come from that specific system. Now, in Phase 5, you have battle. Essentially, how this plays out is each ship is going to get a chance to fire at the enemy. You begin with player order, and the player who's active, he can choose which battles he's going to resolve. If there's more than one enemy in any given system, he's going to pick which enemy he's going to do battle with. Now, here's the thing. As you are fighting, you have the different ships that you placed have different initiative values. There's different initiative ratings next to each of those slots where you put the ships and your mothership. So essentially, how it's going to start is if I'm the attacker, all of my 1s are going to roll. Then all of my 2s are going to roll. Then if he's got any 2s, they'll roll. Then all of my 3s will roll. Then if he's got 3s, they'll roll. Then my 4s will roll. Then if he's got 4s, they'll roll. So you go back and forth with the initiative levels. So that's a very interesting way because it doesn't mean all your ships are just going to be able to fire first and knock everybody out, because there's not really simultaneous combat. If your ship's knocked out, it's knocked out, it doesn't get a chance to fire back. So that is very interesting as well. So each ship fires, and you deal damage, you may remove ships, but you only fire once. So that means once all the ships have fired, both of the ships, if they're remaining there, they remain there. They just have got a lot of damage, usually. During battle, you can also play some of your action cards. And some of your action cards will allow you to do weird and funky things, throw little surprises and a little monkey wrench into combat, and that's very interesting too. Now, what you're rolling is a d6, and essentially you score hits on 4, 5, or 6. So you get a 50-50 shot with every die roll you put out there, and then of course you've got all your other little ships that have funky, different, interesting little abilities and maneuvers they can pull off to give you an advantage in combat. Now finally, you have the rewards phase. If you are the only fleet left in a system, you get a victory point. But all fleets and systems get rewards from that system in the forms of mega credits or diplomatic points or other goodies. And then everybody gets, it's kind of a housekeeping phase, everybody gets a certain amount of mega credits, certain amount of diplomatic points, and a few other things here and there. So you continue going through the 6 phases until one player gains 7 victory points. At the end of that rewards phase in which somebody gets 7 victory points, they are declared the winner, and that is essentially how you play fleets. That, of course, is just a bare overview of how you play fleets. There's more to it. There's a lot more going on, but that's just the most basic explanation of how you play fleets. Fleets is a very interesting game. I want to start with a few of the criticisms of this game that I have. First of all, there's a lot of iconography here. And iconography is one of those things that you need in a lot of games, but if there's too much of it, if it's overwhelming, it can work against the game, because it's not fun to look at a symbol and then say, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? And then you look at another symbol, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? It gets old fast. And I got to tell you, I think Race for the Galaxy is a very fun, very interesting game. But it's a game that I just, over time, it's hard to keep up with that iconography. It's hard to kind of remember what everything's supposed to be if you don't play it a lot. It's not one you just pull out of the shelf and play. And it's hard to teach. And that's a game that suffers from too much iconography. And Fleets maybe isn't quite as bad as Race for the Galaxy, but it's approaching it. There's a lot of iconography you got to know, and it doesn't by any means kill the game, don't get me wrong, but that is something you got to know going into it. You got to learn this iconography language of fleets going into it. Now, also to combat. I'm of two minds about the combat system in this game, because on one hand, I like that initiative thing where the different ships have the different initiative, and they roll at different times, and it goes back and forth depending on the initiative levels. And I like the action cards. They let you do really fun things. They really let you screw over your enemies. And generally speaking, I like just about everything about the combat system except those hits on a 4, 5, or 6. It's a 50-50 shot every time. And it just seemed to me, I really like games that, in their combat systems, they can be innovative with dice, maybe use different kinds of dice for different kinds of guns or ships or something like that. I think Leviathans, which is the airship game, I think that did dice really well. I think Star Wars Armada does dice very well. And I wish I would have liked to see a little bit more from the dice here. And I realize it's not really about the dice. I get that, but I wish it had been. I wish we'd seen a little bit more innovation with combat in that regard. It's a minor complaint, but again, it's something that I think would have made a good game, potentially a great game. Now, there's a lot I like about this game. I like the buying. I like the buying phase, how you're taking turns and you're buying the upgrade cards, the fleets themselves, the different ships. It's all good, and it's all interesting. And there's a real, games are always fun when you can build things, when you feel like you're creating something that is kind of unique, and you get some of that. The game is really, to a large extent, about the kind of fleet you want to build and you want to put out there, and you want to risk or don't risk with the diplomatic points. But building is really a lot of fun in this game. Building the fleets is a core of this game, and it's good. It's awesome. It can lead to some really overpowered fleets. It can lead to some fleets, particularly, again, that can hit on a 4, 5, or 6. It can lead to some really powerful fleets that you just don't want to go near with your own fleet. Still, it's a lot of fun. I liked building it. The ships, the individual ship powers are very fun and very interesting. Upgrade cards are very cool. And generally, I like just about everything in that respect of how this fits together. I like, too, the diplomatic things, how they can add in another layer there, the diplomatic actions you can take, the diplomatic cards that come out. They're fun, they're interesting, too. There's a lot of good choices here. Now, one thing, too, another criticism I have of the game, and that is, as a whole, Fleets is a fun game. There's no denying it. It's a fun game. My group had fun with it. There's a lot of flavor text. There's a lot of little stories in the rule booklet that kind of set up these corporations and the Pleiades and whatnot. And it's cool. But still, when you're actually playing the game, you don't get a real sense of narrative from the game itself. And some games really succeed in giving you a good narrative experience. And this one just doesn't. It just feels like it's a brawl. We're putting together this thing. We're sending it out there. It's going to fight. It fights. Okay. Now I got points. Now he's got points. Okay. Now I'm going to build something. Now we're sending it out there. It fights. Okay. So it's almost like you're building a Frankenstein monster every round and sending it out there. And it's fun. But again, it just doesn't feel terribly narrative, even with the flavor text and the stories and stuff. It just doesn't feel as narrative as I would like. And that's one thing I love about some of my favorite science fiction games. Games like, of course, Twilight Imperium, Star Wars Armada. These are kinds of games that do this grand space opera science fiction well, and you can feel the story in it. And you just didn't really get a story out of Fleets. Again, I suppose that's kind of a minor complaint, but if you're like me and that's something you really like in a game, you'll be disappointed. So, all of this taken together, again, Fleets is a good game. It is just not a great game. And I think some people who like sci-fi games the same way I like sci-fi games, again, might be a little bit disappointed in the overall package. So, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say try it before you buy it. I think there's a lot of people out there that will get a kick out of this slugfest between fleets. I think there's a lot of people that probably won't really respond to it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment here on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. An interesting fact, the Pleiades, of course, is a Greek word for the star cluster. Certain Native American tribes called it the Seven Brothers or the Seven Sisters, and the Japanese actually referred to the Pleiades star cluster as unity. And the Japanese word for unity is Subaru. That's why when you look at the hood ornament of a Subaru automobile, it's got 6 bright stars there. Just thought you'd like to know that.